So that is what happened in the past 2 decades in academia. I've seen it and I documented it step by step. Hamas has penetrated the intellectual tunnels of our academia. And now it shows, and we are paying for that.
Hello, I'm Phelim and welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop. It's just me today. Anne is traveling today, so you'll have to listen to my dulcet tones. So to start really with the big news of the moment, the massacre in Australia. I suppose that just reinforces that there's never been a more important time to put on the October 7th play. As you know, it's going to be at the Kennedy Centre on January the 28th, October 7th, our verbatim play. So it's amazing that we're going to take it to the centre, the cultural epicenter of this country, perhaps cultural epicenter of the world, the Kennedy Centre. It's never been more important to put the truth on stage. It's never been more important to put the truth on stage in Washington, D.C. I think when we started with the October 7th play, which is, we went to Israel after October 7th, interviewed people who survived Israel's darkest day, and the play is 100% verbatim what happened them on that day. We started on October 6th so that people know that they were a people of peace. We compellingly document the attempted genocide of a people, really, the attempt to massacre as many Jewish people as possible. And when we started it, I think we thought that it would be important to combat the anti-Semitism, and we'll discuss that phrase later on in more detail, on the college campuses coming out of the progressive left. It looks now that we also need to play to combat the anti-Zionism, the anti-Semitism coming out of people from the right. So, as I say, never been more important time to put the play on the stage in DC, given what's just happened in Australia. But by the way, Australia is just the latest in a long line of these attacks, from Paris to Manchester to Los Angeles. This is Jewish life now since October 7th. And to talk about that also on the show, we have an interview with a brilliant man, a world expert in AI, a world expert in mathematics, but also a brilliant philosopher and thinker, and whose life has actually been bookended by genocidal attempts on his people. We're going to talk to Judea Pearl, a professor at UCLA, whose grandparents were murdered in Auschwitz, and whose son, Daniel Pearl, was murdered by terrorists in Karachi in 2002. And he's going to talk to us about his new book, but obviously everything that's happening in the world at the moment. And we also have a very big question later on in the show about what is happening in the UK with the law. We've covered the Sandy Peggy case before, the trans madness case, where a nurse objected to having to change in the same room as a male doctor pretending to be a woman. She partially won her employment tribunal case alleging victimization and harassment. Some charges were dismissed, she won some. But it turns out that the 300-page judgment contains made-up quotes, made-up case law. It looks like it was written by AI. It also looks like it was written by AI that is extremely pro-trans. So I can't see how this judgment withstands scrutiny and will be allowed to stand. So we'll talk about that later on the show. So as I was saying, Jew hunting continues around the world. There was a massacre at Bondi Beach in Sydney at the weekend. Bondi Beach, an iconic part of the Australian landscape, the Australian culture. As we're recording this, 15 people are dead. It was a murderous attack on the tiny Jewish community in Australia. It left no generation unscathed. Among the victims were a 10-year-old girl called Matilda. The family asked that her last name not be publicised. Also murdered was Alex Kleteman, a Holocaust survivor, killed trying to protect his wife. Others murdered at the Hanukkah by the Sea event included French citizens, rabbis, Americans. Basically, it just ripped through the Australian Jewish community. I mean, it's a really small Jewish community in Australia, and I know that because it's a long story, but some time ago we were at an event in New York City where we met the Jewish matchmaker from Netflix. There's a TV series called Jewish Matchmaking, and it's introduced by Eliza Ben Shalom, and we met her, a lovely woman, um, uh, perfect for the job. And I remember her saying, I was listening to a podcast that she was on recently, and the podcast said, are there differences in dating, for people in Israel, Jewish people in Israel, Jewish people in America? And the one place she made a point was Australia is quite difficult because it's so small, such a small Jewish community. Everyone knows everyone. And you can have a match made, and it'll be your next door neighbor, or it'll be your cousin or someone you grew up with. So she said it's quite difficult to match make in Australia because everyone is friendly with everyone, everyone knows everyone. So the community is really, really suffering this day. I suppose what it brought home to me is that, globalize the Intifada. This is the phrase we hear. We hear it from Paris to Ireland to UCLA to Colombia. This is what globalize the Intifada means. It means kill Jews everywhere, not just in Israel now. And Australia is just the latest venue for this oldest hatred. This was a straightforward hunting of Jews. And when you post on X and on Twitter and on Instagram that Israel is committing genocide, and when politicians say that Israel is committing genocide, or that Israel is a Nazi state, or that Jews are Nazis, or that Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, you are giving crazy people license to kill. You are saying to these people, it's okay to kill. Now, these radical Islamists don't need much encouragement, but in fact, they need no encouragement, but you give the wider infrastructure, you give the wider community the license to kill, and you get massacres like Bondi Beach. And when you allow mass immigration of radical Islamists into your country, then you are importing a willing army to carry out your instructions, your moral imperative. Because if you have identified someone as a Nazi, if you have identified someone as a war criminal, then the moral imperative is to kill that person. So this is what your words are doing. It's giving people license. It's giving them a moral mission. And who doesn't want a moral mission? So the politicians who thought that after September 11th, it would be a really good idea to increase immigration from Muslim countries into the West, they bear responsibility for this. The politicians who recognized the state of Palestine after October 7th, rewarding an attempted genocide, they bear responsibility. The ultimate responsibility is borne by the people who pulled the triggers, but the wider community does not accept responsibility for this. So this is a good time to go over and interview Judea Pearl. Judea Pearl is a professor, he's a philosopher, he's a brilliant mathematician, he's an expert in AI. His son Daniel Pearl was murdered by terrorists in Karachi in 2002. He was a fellow reporter with the Wall Street Journal. That was back in 2002. His life story was made into a movie which starred Angelina Jolie. And Judea is also a sometimes Shabbat companion of myself and Anne. We actually first met him at a Shabbat here in Los Angeles. So we'll go over to that interview now with Judea to talk about his new book, but also to talk about the state of the world and the state of Israel. So let's go over to that interview now. So we welcome Judea Pearl on the show today. Judea is Israeli American. In fact, he has the distinction of being born in Israel before the foundation of the State of Israel, which I'd like to talk to him about during the interview. Dr. Pearl is the Chancellor's Professor of Computer Science and Statistics at the UCLA. He is the director of UCLA's Cognitive Systems Laboratory. He is known internationally for his contributions to artificial intelligence, human reasoning, and the philosophy of science. He is also the father of slain Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl, who was murdered by terrorists in Karachi in 2002. Dr. Pearl lectures and writes frequently on Jewish identity, the Arab-Israeli conflict, and interestingly, the history of Zionism and how Zionism is treated on campus. We have a lot to cover, Dr. Pearl, but welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Phelim.
Yes, yes. And we're here today to discuss his book, Coexistence and Other Fighting Words, which takes his collective writings over decades, examining anti-Semitism and the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Yeah, thank you. And here's the book. I just received it a few days ago.
Great, great. Well, it's a collection of your writings, and it starts, I think, back in just after Daniel Pearl's murder, after your son's murder, and comes up to the present day. And I want to talk about that timeline. But first, I want to take you back to before that. You were born in pre-independence Israel. Tell me what that was like. Tell me how that has shaped your thinking about anti-Semitism and Zionism, which you make a point of distinguishing about in the book.
You're talking about shifting, but I didn't shift until very late in my life when the tragedy occurred to Daniel. A little bit before that, but you see, I grew up in free Israel. I say it was free even before the 1948 because we as children were totally shielded from the World War II. We were shielded from all stories of anti-Semitism and other problems in life. We were treated like princes, I should say, with a silver teaspoon in our mouth, and all the goodies of life and freedoms that one can think of. Yeah. So that was my childhood, and
Yeah.
the shift occurred much later when I came to this country. And I learned that the anti-Semites still exist, but they were so rare. I was so excited when I found one that I came home and I told my wife, they do exist. They do exist.
They do.
With excitement. Yes.
Yes. Funny. I had similar feelings about anti-Semitism in America, but we seem to have entered a new phase. But let's go back. You didn't know anything about anti-Semitism living in Israel, but I suppose being Jewish, you're never far from a pogrom. You're never far from an attempt at genocide. Your grandparents, as you say in the book, died in Auschwitz in 1942, and I suppose 60 years later, your son died in Karachi, Pakistan.
Correct, but you see, we had the vision or illusion that this is all took place in the library books that we borrowed. It was part of history, and it's all finished because now, and I think now, I mean, in pre 1948 Israel, we have a state of our own, and this is just part of history, but not part of our real life. Okay, first time I encountered the problem was when I got into the kitchen in 1942 or 3, and I saw my mother crying, and I asked her what's going on, and she said, well, there is a war in Europe, and I have a family there. And I said, so what? Wars come and wars go. My history books are full of wars. It will get over. She said, no, this is a different kind of a war. And I couldn't really grasp what she means until we saw some survivors of our age joining our class in school, and we saw them differently. They were meek, they had a different skin color, and they were talking and thinking differently than ours. And we didn't realize at that time what they have gone through.
Then, I suppose, anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism came to your door in 1948 with the war, or I suppose, I don't know what it's called, the War of Independence, when the 5 Arab states attacked Israel.
Correct. My first memory of independence was cuddling with other kids in a staircase in our neighbors. My mother told me don't play too far from home because things are not different these
Mm-hmm.
days. The trouble in the air. I couldn't understand what she
Yeah.
means until we found ourselves bombarded by Egyptians' warplane and uh, helping each other, trying to encourage each other. And a neighbor opened the door, and the neighbor declared, "Hey kids, the war started. Things are going to get much worse, but we will prevail." We couldn't
Mm-hmm.
quite make it what he means. Things are going to be worse. How can things be worse when the whole house is shaking and you find
Mm-hmm.
Spartan, I know, you find yourself
Yeah.
under real airplanes, which was the first time
Mm-hmm.
we experienced that. These were, I think, Messerschmitts and Spitfires that the Egyptians Air
Mm-hmm.
Force somehow got. And they bombarded our little town, which was next to Tel Aviv. Evidently, they thought that we have some military installation there. It was really a textile factory.
Mm-hmm. So, but you did prevail, and Israel prevailed, and then you came to the United States, and as you say, it was really a golden place for Jews, for Judaism. There was no apparent anti-Semitism. When did that change? I mean, I saw you wrote an article in 2005 about problematic campuses. You identified 4 of them, and it's in the book. This is a collection of your writings. This is June 9th, 2005. In the past 3 months, I visited 4 troubled campuses: Duke, York in Canada, Columbia, and UC Irvine, where tension between Jewish and anti-Zionist students have attracted national attention. When did that start? When did that really take off, that the anti-Zionism or anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish feeling on campuses
I
and in
think it's
America?
really started with the second Intifada. That's where I realized that the anti-Jewish sentiments are really directed at
Mm-hmm.
Israel. They were all
Mm-hmm.
anti-Israel existence. But
Mm-hmm. Remind people, when was the second Intifada?
in 2000,
On
when the
2000.
Camp David
Mm-hmm.
failed and Arafat
Mm-hmm.
did not accept the offer that Barak presented and President
Mm-hmm.
Clinton. So that's what it started, and we had discussion groups, and it turned out I noticed there that there is an undercurrent which is anti-Zionist, and it bothered me more than anti-Semitism because
Mm-hmm.
I had the illusion the anti-Semitism really it's not part of our life. It's a passé.
Mm-hmm.
It's a disease that has been shoved to
Eradicated.
the dustbin of history. Hitler
Yeah.
gave a bad name for anti-Semitism, so we thought it's
Mm-hmm.
all over. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm interested now, and I remain to be convinced. I need you to convince me. You say that anti-Zionism is worse than anti-Semitism.
Of course.
Um, that and that it's anti-Zionism that's at the center of these this hostility towards Jews on campus, and that you said that we have failed students because we haven't given them the tools to attack anti-Zionism. So convince me that anti-Zionism is what's behind these protests, or what was behind these protests. Convince me that anti-Zionism is the new anti-Semitism and worse than
You
anti-Semitism.
forget about whether it is equal or different or worse than anti-Semitism. Let's just talk of what it means. Anti-Zionism means
Mm-hmm.
undoing the state of Israel, which means you are
Mm-hmm.
taking 8 million people and you're telling them you are going to be stateless from now on. And you are going either to return to the countries from which supposedly you came. So, and you
Mm-hmm.
are going to be stateless in a very bad neighborhood called the Middle East, where
Mm-hmm.
genocidal designs are not uncommon. Okay, that is
Mm-hmm.
really it's a genocidal plan, and that very few people talk about that, and very few people name it genocidal. But just imagine what it
Mm-hmm.
means. It means that you have no right to defend yourself anymore. You have to depend on the mercy of your neighbors, which hasn't been merciful
Mm-hmm.
that far, right? So it is really a
Yes.
genocidal design that should be named a genocidal design. So this is what anti-Zionism is. Plus,
Mm-hmm.
it has quite few elements that makes it worse than anti-Semitism. One of them being the fact that it cloaks itself in a political style, uh, which
Mm-hmm.
means it doesn't uh, it allow yourself to escape all the safeguard that we have against racism and says no, we are just political statement and political opinion, and
Mm-hmm.
political opinion is protected by First Amendment, Second Amendment, who knows how many amendments. Okay, unlike, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, being like Islamophobia or any talk
Mm-hmm.
against another minority group which are based on religion. Religion is extremely protected in this country,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps in other countries too, but not so political opinion. So covering itself
Mm-hmm.
in the cloak of political opinion, it escapes all safeguards and penetrates the mind of
Mm-hmm.
young people and old people and permits itself to create a tremendous harm, to penetrate into the
Mm-hmm.
mind of people and attain all the licenses for hostilities.
What you're saying is you're saying Zionism is racism because, or it's as bad as racism because it denies a collective group of people the right to be a collective group of people, to be a state.
It denies a nation the right for self-determination. And now we have to go and ask,
Mm-hmm.
are Jews a nation or just a religion? And knowing something about Judaism, I'll tell you that we have been a
Yes.
nation from the time of Abraham. Okay? And
Mm-hmm.
throughout the scripture, if you read it carefully, Jews have been a nation. I shouldn't go far as just to mention what God tells Abraham. And go to where I tell you, and I'll make you into a great nation, and all other nations will be blessed through you. Yeah, this is the creation
Mm-hmm.
of the Jewish nation at that time. Okay, and the idea of
Yes.
returning, of going, of being independent, namely being sovereign in the, that land, has been the force which kept Jews alive. It has become a scripture. The relationship to the land
Mm-hmm.
has become the scripture. It became a central element in Jewish identity. So obviously we are a nation and we are connected and we have historical attachment to this
Mm-hmm.
land. Okay. Now you deny us the right for self-determination, which you grant to other people, the other nations like French and Palestinian. Okay. That is
Yeah.
obviously a discrimination of first degree.
I read about your trip to Doha. You wrote about it in 2005. You called it Dialogue of the Deaf
Correct. Yeah.
because in 2005, and I don't think the situation, well, first of all, you found it very discouraging when you went to Doha that basically the idea was if you want Muslim nations to progress, we have to erase Israel. That's the big barrier to progress in the Middle East is the existence of Israel. Tell us about that disappointment, even from the so-called liberal Muslims at this conference, and whether you think with the Abraham Accords there's been any change in these nations' opinions towards Israel, or is it as bad as it was in 2005, 20 years ago?
Yeah, let's go to Doha. The surprise that I had was that moderate Muslims and not Palestinian, but the entire Muslim world, okay, were
Correct.
gathered there in order to discuss moderation and progress in Islamic countries. Okay,
Yeah.
so we took it as an invitation. I'm saying the American delegation, of which I was part of, we took it as a willingness from the Muslim side to join the progressive and then enlightenment that the West can offer. But they didn't take
Yes.
it like that. They took it as a blackmail thing. If you want us to progress, give us the head of Israel. That was the nature.
Yeah.
Which means solve the Palestinian problem, solve the Israel problem, and what it means to solve means to dissolve in their mind. It meant
Yes.
really eliminate Israel, and then we'll talk to you about progress. We love progress, but only on
That's
condition.
that's right. Yes. Yeah, and yeah, as you say, even from liberal journalists and liberal commentators and liberal leaders, that was the opinion. Do you think has that changed? Have they progressed now with the Abraham Accords?
Absolutely, yes. Abraham Accord is really the key to the future. If you see future as a peaceful coexistence, yes, it has changed because it came from the top and by courageous leaders, and they have followed a few steps which are necessary. Um, they have I've seen them coming to the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles here and playing Hatikva. You understand that? They-
No.
okay. The, the orchestra of Bahrain came to Santa Monica and played the Israeli anthem. Okay? And when I
Wow.
heard that, I said, yes,
Okay.
peace is coming. Because
Wow. Okay. That's something. That's something. So, would you say this book is but then we had October 7. Then you had widespread, after October 7, you had widespread anti-Semitism. You call it anti-Zionism, and I think you're right. And you had the recognition of the state of Palestine. You really, a surge in anti-Israeli feeling, leading to things like the shooting on Bondi Beach that we've just seen. So the question is, was October 7 a reaction towards the Abraham Accords, to a reaction towards the liberalization? Is it a blip, or is it a game changer? Have relations deteriorated so much? Is Israel in trouble now, or is it on a path to success?
Israel is in trouble, and what October 7 unveiled was that many in the West have never really internalized the idea that Jews have a right for self-determination. They kept it as, yes, it exists, Israel exists. And many said even Israel has a right to defend itself, Israel has a right to exist, but of course only on condition that it behaves the way we want it to behave. Right? Okay. That was the going conversation. After October 7, the idea that Israel should not exist became part of got into the mainstream. It became
Mm-hmm.
and it
Correct.
became open. You can openly say
Mm-hmm.
in the West, in the middle of Los Angeles, you can stand there and say, who said that Israel has a right to exist? Maybe it should. Maybe 8 million people should be sent back to Germany or to Iraq. Okay? Uh, That what
Mm-hmm.
happened on October 7th, and it was surprising to me, and it was the revelation that
Mm-hmm.
the idea has never penetrated deeply, sufficiently in the mind of Western intellectuals, and this deficiency, this disease, this
Mm-hmm.
contradiction has surfaced on October 7th.
Yeah. So just to really finish up, your life has been bookended by, I suppose, murder. I mean, you know that your grandparents were murdered in Auschwitz. You survived the genocide, attempted genocide of the 1948 invasions, and then your son Daniel was murdered in 2002 by terrorists in Karachi, brutally murdered. And before he died, his last words were, "I am Jewish," which was sending a message to the world, I think. Are you hopeful for the future, or is this the eternal way the Jewish people are going to be, always watchful, always fearful?
Well, uh, I'm worried. I'm worried about the future of Israel. And if Israel goes, then the Jewish people becomes very vulnerable, and I think they will not exist. But I see also islands of hope, and it gives me, you can say, encouragement to continue in what I'm doing and to fight for both the sensibility and the rationality of the West and all the promises of the Enlightenment, together with the existence of the
Mm.
Jewish people. So
Mm-hmm.
the hope I see in my students, in the few Jewish enclaves that have taken over and say enough is enough. We are going to assert ourselves very clearly. We have history on our side, and we are going to
Mm-hmm.
articulate our contribution to society and to the planet, and
Mm-hmm.
we are going to go on the offense. We are going to name and
Mm-hmm.
shame anti-Zionists for what they are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, it's good to end on hope. Certainly, I think we've all been surprised by what has happened in the West since October 7th. I suppose it's good to know that that is there, that it exists. Um, do you think do you think it is the fault of the people say it's the fault of the campuses? Is it just that people are more free to express it on campuses, or do you think it comes out of the
No, it
campuses?
comes out of the campuses. For two
Wow.
decades, the campuses allowed themselves to be hijacked by activists, by intellectual deformity, um, conducted by professors
Mm-hmm.
that have each committed to the destruction of Israel and have
Yeah.
each of them is a committed person, fully aware of what he or she is doing, calculating and hijacking the department in the sense that it's very easy for an entire department like the history department to be hijacked by one
Mm-hmm.
professor. It's enough that you have one
Yeah.
loudmouth and the entire department give in because academia it,
Yeah.
it's a society where you depend on the opinion of your peers, perhaps more so
Mm-hmm.
than the
Yeah.
entertainment industry. Okay, and
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
becomes extremely um, herd driven. HERD.
Yeah.
So,
Heard. Yes.
so
Yes.
that is what
Yep.
happened in the past 2 decades in academia. I've seen it and I
Hmm.
documented it step by step. Hamas has penetrated the intellectual tunnels of our academia. And now
Yeah.
it shows, and we are paying for that.
Well, yes. Well, hopefully, I think there is a change coming in academia, and hopefully, the current administration is definitely helping with that, and hopefully that continues. Judea, thank you very much for coming on the show. Your book is called Coexistence and Other Fighting Words. It's a very naughty title.
I hope that people will take it as being naughty, because I meant to be naughty, because the people whom we need to convince and to sway over to coexistence see the idea of coexistence to be a humiliating defeat. Yep.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
correct, correct. Yeah, funny. I mean, I'm not saying that the history of I mean, I come from a community where Protestants and Catholics find occasionally find it rather difficult to coexist. There's no one is no one's hands are clean. In the coexistence hypocrisy, but some are more violent than others. Some are more unfriendly than others, and you know. That when you see that sign on the bumper sticker, the coexistence, there's one symbol. If you took out one symbol, which is the Islam symbol, all the rest of the religions these days can pretty much coexist, except for one. So it's that's the fight, that's the fighting word, that's the fighting part of that word is the Islamic symbol. So hopefully coexistence is the way ahead.
I hope so, yes.
Let's see what the future holds. Thank you very much for coming on
Well,
the
thank you
show,
for having me,
Judea.
Phelim.
Thank you. So that was a great interview. Some hope there from Judea. I suppose it's always darkest before the dawn, and I think the Abraham Accords are, as he says, a game changer. I don't think you can roll back from that. I don't think you can go back from that. And as he said, these societies are very top heavy. Influence spreads downwards, not upwards. And let's see how Israel's neighbors behave in the next decade or so. So I want to talk now about the UK, the Sandy Peggy case. I went to the Sandy Peggy case. Sandy Peggy was a nurse with 30 years experience. She objected on Christmas Eve to sharing a changing room with a male nurse who thought he was a woman. The National Health Service fully backed the man pretending to be a woman and came down on her like a ton of bricks. She was suspended, she was investigated, and she took a case in an employment tribunal alleging harassment, alleging victimization. And whilst the case was ongoing, actually, the UK Supreme Court decided that sex discrimination did not apply to men pretending to be women, that a woman was a woman and a man was a man. And for the purposes of law, those were two separate categories, and there was no such thing as trans women or trans men. However, the judgment came out and basically ignored and actually rewrote what the Supreme Court said, completely misrepresented what the Supreme Court said, but even more egregiously. It's a 300-page document. And as I said in my intro, they did find for Sandy Peggy, the nurse in this, in a number of grounds. They did find she was a victim of harassment, but also they did not find for her on a significant number of other grounds. So then people started reading the 300-page document. And I've never heard of this before. I've never heard of this before. The judge quoted a previous ruling, a precedent that he was basing his judgment on, and completely made up a quote from several other documents. There was one significant one, a really significant one that he made up, that was in the Maya Forrester case. And when that was pointed out, the judge went in and rewrote the judgment and resubmitted it and put in the proper quote. This raises, and then it emerged there are other quotes and there are other errors. Now, the tribunal tried to say this was a clerical error. This is not a clerical error. This is a major, major error, mistake. The quote they made was just used up. So they were basing the judgment on a made-up precedents quote. I don't know if you can go in and rewrite a judgment that significantly. But there were other pretty major errors. There was a group called Not All Gays, and it's made up of people who are gay but do not buy into the trans madness. And they were quoting this group, Not All Gays, and they changed their name to Not For Gays, as in we are against gay people. A very, very significant change. And the thinking is, and the Scottish judiciary have refused to comment on this, the thinking is that the judgment was heavily written by AI and that these changes were made by a trans-friendly AI app. So we've had cases in the United States and in the UK where lawyers submit briefs to the judge and they were written by AI. And of course, AI is never short of an answer. AI will always come up with an answer and they will make stuff up. So this is the first case, I believe, where a judge apparently, allegedly, has used AI to write a judgment and the AI bot has completely made up a quote. So I think probably by the time you're watching this, maybe the judgment will be withdrawn. Maybe the judge will have to resign. But this is Scotland. It's basically a communist state where the judiciary is pretty much corrupted. So it may have to go to a UK-wide judge, to the Supreme Court. But this cannot stand. But it just shows you what happens. The trans madness has corrupted medicine. It has corrupted journalism, where journalists with a straight face write about, call male rapists she. So she raped someone. She did this with her penis. Literally, that is in journalism nowadays. So it's corrupted medicine, it's corrupted journalism, and now it's corrupted the judiciary. This is what happens when you allow rots like that to happen. So watch this space and we'll see what happens. This is the last podcast before Christmas. And I know we had this last week, but we really, I feel it's now my duty to bring mince pies to America. I was brought up in mince pies. They were a staple part of my Christmas, and they are a staple. I was brought up in a British culture, and they are a staple part of the British culture. And, you know, I know you Americans got rid of that about 250 years ago, but, you know, maybe you should have kept the mince pies. They're an ancient way of celebrating Christmas. I think they go back to the 1400s. Unlike what it sounds, there is no meat in mince pies. It's fruits and raisins and sultanas and figs and a little bit of alcohol. They're very, very tasty. They work great with cream. So we're going to replay that how to make mince pies segment, because to me, no Christmas is complete without mince pies, and Americans are doing themselves a disservice if they don't have a mince pie on the table after their Christmas dinner. So have a great Christmas. We will see you after Christmas, and Anne will be back then. It's been a real pleasure working with you all this year. Please leave plenty of comments on the YouTube. We do read them all, and we will respond to them all. Don't forget, we're a 501c3. If you want to help us keep doing what we do, please go to unreportedstoriesociety.com and give what you can. Thank you. Bye.
For today, by the way, and for this week, just to remind people that it's still, you know, it's still winter. And so I would recommend people to make mince pies. And for those of you in America, obviously people in the UK and Ireland have no problem finding mincemeat. But by the way, I found this mincemeat made by Wilkin and Sons. It's a UK one. I got that, I think, in Gelson's. Obviously, Gelson's very expensive. But I also found this stuff called None Such mincemeat. And for those of you who don't know, there's no meat in mincemeat. And you put it into short crust pastry and it's yummy and you eat it with clotted cream. And I would highly recommend it. Let's have a look at that recipe right now. I want to talk about food now because I should talk about food now. But so here's the thing about what we made yesterday. Yeah. So we made mince pies yesterday. We made the mince pies together, by the way. And I'm all about cheating. I think it's really important. People are really busy and tired. And I think cheating is fine with food. So here's how you cheat this. And it's so easy. So first of all, I didn't know. I started making the mince pies and I was thinking, I wonder, can Americans buy mince meat? So this is mince meat. And we're showing it up. I think there'll be a better version of this up on your screen. But basically, this is from Cross and Blackwell. And I just checked it out. All the supermarkets in America, sir, have this thing called mincemeat. What you do, and I've put up the recipe, it's super simple. You cut up an apple. You put an apple into some of this. I used a half of this jam jar yesterday and made, what did I make, like 10? I made like 10 of these. And I bought the ready rolled pastry from Trader Joe's. And you know what?
Yeah.
Good luck to you if you want to make pastry, and it's great, and it's lovely, and all of that.
Can I just say Trader Joe's is overrated? Okay, moving on.
Phelim has a thing with Trader Joe's, but I can tell you one thing. I was very impressed with their pastry. Did you not think the pastry was great?
No, the pastry was, and I was heavily involved in the pastry.
He was, and we're going to put up a whole bunch of photographs of us making making these mince pies yesterday. They came out of the oven, and by the way, you'll notice, and look at those photographs, they're not the prettiest, right? They're not perfect. But if you came for perfect cookery, this is not the place for it, right? It ain't always pretty, but it always tastes good, right? Like, I think that's the trick, right? But here's what was incredible was, I said, we were going out for a walk, let's just have one. So I had 3. How many did you have? You had 3 in that one sitting.
Yeah, that was one or two.
And then he came back for more. And here's how you serve them. Serve them with, like, clotted cream, heavy pouring cream, or just vanilla ice cream. They are killer. And the truth is, you can eat them cold. I think you can eat them cold. Yes, of course you can eat them cold.
Talk about
I'd prefer to eat them warm.
I like them cold.
What are we going to talk about?
So, let's go into the more details. But are you going to put the recipe up? Or,
no, the recipe's going to go
describe,
up. Couldn't it be simpler? So you're just going to, what you do, by the way, you don't need a pastry cutter for this. Roll out your pastry, and instead of a pastry cutter, use a glass. Find a glass. Different glass shapes.
Big enough for the pocket.
The bottom needs to be bigger than the top. So you need a lid. You need a bottom, big circle. The lid, smaller circle. Yeah. And then you're going to spoon in like 2, don't overfill them.
People, so you make the big one, you put it into the muffin tray and you fit it in.
Phelim was very good at this.
And then you spoon in not too much.
Not too much, but some of them a little bit too much.
Some of them.
And they will explode.
Some of them spilled over.
Some of them spilled over, but spilled over in a gorgeous way.
And then
you this caramelized thing
going on. Put the lid on and
remember my word, caramelized. Caramelized is another word for burnt. Yeah, go on ahead.
And you put the lid on.
You put the lid on and you press down.
Pastry and you press down.
You press down, right, to make a seal. Some people will put a little rim of water to help with making the seal. And then I used an egg wash. You could use a milk wash either to just get a lovely sheen off the top. Then the other really important thing to do is to prick a hole, not a hole, but just prick with a knife, with a sharp knife, into the top of all of them, so they don't explode, so that they have air to breathe. And then put them in. We put them in
top of the oven.
At the top of the oven, 400. Preheat the oven to 400. Put them in for. Take them out and look at them at 20 minutes. And by the way, when people are not, when I'm not 100% saying, exactly 20 minutes, it's because I don't know your oven and you know your oven. If you've got a very fast oven, they'll probably be done in 20 minutes. We were going more to like 25, 26, 27 minutes. But what you really want is the top to get a little bit browned, and you take them out. Don't eat them like instantly, but it's very hard. We sort of did, but we didn't burn ourselves, right?
Cool down a bit.
Let them cool down a bit. I took them outside and put them outside because the weather had improved a little bit here. But we had them with the clotted cream.
Crazy California. We should do a Crazy California section. The weather's terrible. That's crazy.
Weather's crazy California. I want my money back. I don't know why I'm paying the high taxes. It's 50 degrees today.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Yes.
But I can tell you one thing. If you have never tried to make mince pies, do it. Do it.
Do it with a suet.
Do it with a suet. Look at you, Phelim. And send us a photograph. I'd love to see a photograph of your mince pies. And send me any questions if I've left something out in that. But the recipe is going to go up on the Facebook page. They're really, really yummy. They're a nice thing to bring if you're going over to somebody's house for a tree trimming.
And they're British, innit?
And what you could do is bring them over uncooked and put them into their oven, actually, so that you get them out of the oven nice and hot. I don't want to eat them cold. And by the way, can I just say, I have never made mince pies before, but they were a huge success, number one. And number two, I didn't like mince pies before, but I really like these.
Yeah, they were great.
Really
Loved
nice.
them.
And I have to say, this particular mincemeat, as they call it, mincemeat, is pretty nice. Now, that could be because there's rum and brandy in it.
And
you
it's
can
Cross
never
and
go
Blackwell,
wrong.
the
You know, it's
original
Cross and
British
Blackwell, which is a
mincemeat.
very British name, by the way. But I chopped up a little apple in there because it just gave it just a little bit of different consistency with this mincemeat. So anyway, do it with suet.
Do it with suet.
And you'll love it. You really will love it. But try not to eat 3 of them in a row. But they are fabulous.